Hello, everybody. This is Jamie Buckley with Life of Fiction, and this is episode 1. And I'm here this morning. I get to visit with my daughters, but my daughter Asia in particular, and I want to ask you some questions, Asia, if you don't mind.
Okay, shoot.
Because this is Life of Fiction, I want to talk to you about the kind of books that you like and the things that you've been experiencing. Because you and I, we talk about books. We talk about fiction a lot. So I have 5 questions. We can expand on these, but 5 that I want to go over. The first one is, how do you think fiction as a genre has changed over your lifetime?
How has fiction as a genre changed?
I mean, how has fiction, let's put it this way, how has fiction that you've been experiencing changed from when you were a little girl to now that you're married and a mom? Do you think the stories have changed? I know there's always things being added to, but...
I think the moral content in the fiction books that I'd read has gone down.
The moral content's gone down?
Well, so when I was little, one of the first fictional books that I read, it actually started by my older sister reading it to me, was Narnia.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't take a genius to be able to pick out a lot of the morals.
Okay.
Throughout all, I believe there's 7 books. Throughout all 7 books.
Okay.
And it was just a really enjoyable read as a kid.
Uh-huh.
It was very magical.
Okay.
And that may have had something to do with Cecily reading to me under twinkle lights every night.
Yeah.
and she's just a fairy herself.
It's true. It's true.
But as I got older, it did seem like it was increasingly difficult to find works of fiction that weren't just total trash.
When you say total trash, I'd like to know what you mean by that. I mean, are we talking about, if you walk into my office, it's funny because when we did in moving, we did the big garage sale, mm-hmm. and your mom had a whole bunch of books that we don't, because we're wall-to-wall books. And there were books that she just didn't want to have around anymore. I ended up grabbing the Twilight books and putting them in my office. So now, right behind my desk, I have a full box set of the hardback of the Twilight books because I enjoyed that. I enjoyed her ability in storytelling.
See,
but I want to know because I would consider those definitely YA and not. They're more grown-up themes. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious what you mean by trashy.
By trashy, I think I really do just mean lacking in morals. One of the great things about one of the superpowers of being a storyteller is that you're creating what's the word?
What, your world building?
Well, no. As a storyteller, any storyteller, what you're doing is you're creating a story founded on characters that people get to look up to.
Uh-huh.
And I actually think that's really, really powerful. It's very influential, having people read and then live in your work, between the pages of your story. That's really, really powerful, the kind of influence you have over people's minds and hearts by telling that story. And so I do think it's important to be creating characters that actually are worth following and emulating. That's the word I was looking for. And I feel like those are becoming harder to find. So you brought up Twilight. I actually think that's a great example, because Stephenie Meyers is a phenomenal writer.
I agree.
Just her ability to craft stories is truly brilliant.
You get so invested in all her characters. It's just,
You do.
I love them.
But some of her stories have a lot of substance to them, good storylines and characters you can really get behind. And some of her other stories, the characters really just don't have a lot going for them. There's no virtue. There is no moral to it. And that was my issue with the Twilight, because I read all of them.
Right.
I will admit that. I read all of them. I ate them up because
Right.
I just couldn't put them down. Her writing style is addictive.
Uh-huh.
But once I was done, I looked back and went, wow, what a complete and utter waste of my time. Because I don't want to be like any of those people. There was nothing to really root for. It was all very carnal and really debasing, honestly. There was no substance to her story. She told that story very well,
Yeah.
which I do think that that's to her credit. But I would never recommend those books or read them again, because there was nothing of value in them, save maybe a little bit more exposure for me in how a story can be told. Mm-hmm. But I actually felt a little bit, maybe this is silly, I don't know, but I actually felt a little bit manipulated when I finished reading those books.
Really?
Because
How so? Can you give me an example? Or?
well, no, it was just it felt really manipulative that you could tell a story so well without offering anything of value. She did it so well. I read every single book. I just breezed through them. I could not put them down. And at the end I was like, wow, she didn't give me anything worth having. I was so frustrated with myself. Anyway, I feel like that's becoming more common as time goes by, that people are writing stories not to teach anything, but
I can't remember what author it was. I think it was a male author that, an indie author, that said, I write to entertain. That's the only reason that I do it. I just write to entertain. I'm not trying to. Oh no, it wasn't. It wasn't an indie author. It was. Is it R.L. Stine that does the Goosebump books?
I think so.
I did his master class. I took that. I loved the platform master class. I remember I went through his course on writing to the middle grade, and he said, I never write for morals or to teach a lesson or anything. I write exclusively just to entertain kids. That's it. That's all I'm doing it for. So it's, like me or don't like me, but that's what I write for, is I'm just entertaining kids. And I realize I have respect for that. If that's your only goal, that's fine. My goal, of course, as a writer is to go far beyond that, is to do exactly what you're talking about, wanting to create, heroes and characters that are worth emulating. But I also want to point out that I wonder if there are books as well that have characters that you don't want to emulate, but maybe also teach you about different character traits in real human beings of what to avoid. You ever thought of that?
Yeah, I have, actually. Anyway, we were talking about there being a place for imagination and entertaining for entertainment's sake. I do think there's a place for that, of giving children a safe place to be immersed in wonder.
Love that.
I think that's wonderful.
Yep.
But since becoming a mother, I am a lot more particular about where those forms of entertainment come from. Not all entertainment is safe and good, and you know what, if it can be entertaining as well as educational. I would prefer that.
Okay.
And that's
when you say educational, what do you mean by educational? I mean,
you're right. That's really broad.
I mean, that's
really
that's
general.
Pretty broad, you know.
Being educated in what?
Yeah, exactly.
Educating my children in the values I would like to see instilled in them. So things in...
That could kind of be a tall order, you know, unless you really, really know the book well. I mean, I can see that as being able to accomplish that in a children's book. I could see accomplishing that in, you know, an early reader, or maybe even, I mean, you can still figure out and see what lessons are being taught in middle grade. But what about, you know, you get to the YA or the upper middle grade, you know, type books. That's a hard thing to, I don't know. How do you?
So I have two things to say about that. The first one being Mom did it. So a lot of the things that I read, one of two things had to happen. One, either she previewed it first or read it with me so that she was 100% aware of what I was being exposed to, which is her right as a parent.
Yes.
And then number two is if she could not preview it, she did expect me to talk to her about it. And so this is something that I did all through my schooling years, is that Mom and I would talk for hours and hours on end, just every day of the week, constantly talking about what I was taking in, and then we would go over concepts. And
you could ask questions,
and
you could have the discussions.
We would discuss literally everything, which I actually really loved, but this was also a way for Mom to help structure correct thinking. And I don't know that would have been possible if Mom hadn't really encouraged conversation in our home and held that space for me to be able to come talk to her about anything.
Yeah.
That's something that I really appreciate about Mom, actually.
Well, your mom's phenomenal.
Yep,
she's an anomaly. She's not the norm.
Anyway, so if we're talking about things that are teaching things of high moral character, things of virtue, which is what I would like my children to grow up being mostly exposed to. You don't want to only expose them to those things, right? They need contrast. They need opposition. Mm-hmm. You know, without sadness, how would you know if you're ever happy?
Right.
So you need that. But if I can't preview everything for my children, I do want to create a space where we're always holding discussions in our home, like my mother did for me, so that when they encounter things that are not of a clean and edified nature, which is okay, those things, everybody comes up against those things in life, in real life, not just literature,
right.
That we can discuss the principles at play here. And sometimes that's it's a great opportunity to examine and identify what not to do, not just what to do, like you were saying before. I think that's great. That all has its place. But so your original question was how do I think
fiction has changed over time?
So I guess I've moved further away from that, because I feel like fiction just as a genre just isn't very wholesome. But I think I've moved on from that to more to the kind of relationship I want to have with my children, so that when they are encountering things that are not wholesome, because that's life,
Right.
that they know where to go. And that I'm raising independent thinkers with a well-rounded mind.
Which is going to mean exposing them to various things
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
And, one of the things I want to point out, especially since I spend so much time on World Anvil, I looked up the various worlds there. There's like 1.5 million fictional worlds right now on World Anvil. And I went and I looked up their database, and they're just this is fiction, so that includes fantasy, sci-fi, all that. There are 57 general genres, 57, and then I have no idea how many subgenres under each of those that there are. But it amazed me how many categories there are with fiction now. And so, that's, growing up, I only ever knew science fiction and fantasy. That was fiction to me, and everything fell within those two general categories that I was reading at the time. And now you've got all sorts of, high magic, low magic, mystery fiction. Well, I guess there was always the mystery and all that. That just wasn't a category that I was usually involved in. But how do you think these things have changed? You say that the wholesomeness of that. Do you think that do you see any patterns in occurring themes? Because I've been noticing something heavily. And I saw it first in movies. You've got like the Star Wars movies, went from something that I absolutely idolized. I know I've said this to you before, but Nana and Papa and myself, we stood in line and watched the very first showing of Star Wars, the very first showing of that movie on a screen. On the very first day, the very first opening. And that was amazing. That captivated me. I was there as a kid with a drawing pad and a pencil in the dark, drawing as I watched The Dark Crystal up on the screen as a kid. And yet, now, then he finished, Lucas finished the stories, and then he turned things over to Disney, sold to Disney, and then, everything went to hell. I went to hell, and it just went to shit. It just made crap and destroyed what was left of what I remembered of, Star Wars. The cartoons are better than the other movies, but it just shows, and what I'm specifically getting at is you watch the way that these last movies were made, and it seems like all the characters reflect the way that this new generation acts and lives out in the world. Everything's a 10. Everything is needed, is wanted and expected right now. And for some reason, like, what's her name? That was the Jedi, the female that doesn't have to. What is it, Ren? What's the name of is it Ren? I don't remember because I don't care. It's a female character. It doesn't matter if it was female either. It just makes it more irritating that it was female. She's just naturally perfect and good at everything that she does, which is bullshit. That doesn't happen with anybody, ever, in any, form of reality. And yet, it almost feels like that is what is expected in today's generation of, I'm all I need to be. I'm good enough right now. Okay. Good enough in what? I'm just good enough. Well, no, you're not. Well, how can you say that? Well, because you're acting like an ass, and I don't think an ass is good. So, but seeing that reflect, I'm seeing stories, movies, music, books reflect what I think is completely screwed up in society right now. It's mirroring. And the funny thing is you're seeing an older generation push back against it. You know, they're just pushing back. It's like, all right, we tried to do this peacefully. You are now a bully. Well, guess what we do to bullies? That's kind of the impression I'm getting with a lot of stories, where I want to talk with you in another podcast about this, about it's almost like people are trying to require, because I'm sure as hell not going to do it, but trying to require certain markers are met with your book, or they say they brand you that you're a certain type of author. I think that's absolute horseshit. And where I really back the freedom of speech is in writing. And I know I went off on a tangent, but
no, it was a good tangent, but I definitely think that entertainment reflects the societal values of today.
Do you think it... I keep wondering if it's about a balance between, is it a reflection of, or... that's a hard one. You know why? Because I don't know that I completely... I wonder if it's a reflection of, or trying to continue training to convince you to be a certain way. Or maybe it's both.
Ooh, you talking about grooming?
Yeah, grooming. Exactly.
It's conditioning.
Yeah, conditioning. Well, that's true. I mean, a friend of mine told me, he says, I'd move to California if it wasn't California. And I thought, yeah. I mean, California gives you cancer at this point. So, people they don't stand for law. They don't take accountability, responsibility. And so, for themselves. And so I wonder how that reflects in books. I don't know, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I'm just seeing a lot of these challenges it seems the readership has really changed, and the books have really changed, and there's a lot of it I just can't get behind anymore. Whew. Okay, yeah, that was a tangent. So the second question that I've got for you was, how has the consumption of fiction books, or books, how has that changed?
I have no idea.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, let's see, because I know that you prefer paper, right? You prefer a printed book?
Oh, we're going down that route.
We're going down that route, yes.
Switching to electronics. Yes. You know what? I really do love the convenience of my Nook, getting to have an entire library in my bag. The convenience, it speaks for itself. And the whole nightlight on the screen thing, that is such a fantastic feature.
It's my favorite electronic device.
That gets used often. I mean, because when does a mother get time to read?
Right.
After the kids are in bed.
Right.
So, and I don't want to be sitting up after a long day.
No.
So
I get
I'm gonna be laying back in my bed with my 12 pillows. And my Nook and its cool nightlight propped on my stomach. The convenience there just can't be
and the new ones are
overlooked.
waterproof. Did you know that?
Really? Have you dunked it?
Yeah, actually.
You did not.
Yes. I asked them at the store at Barnes & Noble, I said, so you can get the extra, warranty thing. I says, in case there's an extra, in case there's an accident, right? They said, oh yes, even if you accidentally stepped on it. It says, well, it says that it's waterproof, so if I drop it in the tub and it breaks, she says, oh no, we'll replace it. So I just went home and I tossed it in the tub. Works just fine. I still
Are you
have it. That was like,
serious?
yeah, that was 2 years ago. My Nook is awesome. Yeah, I just tossed it in the tub. We got one for Ethany, and the first thing she did is she went and took a long, Evan for her birthday, I think, made her the big long.
It's like the bathtub tray.
Yeah, the
thing.
tray that goes
Yeah.
across, out of wood. Yeah, she was just in there in a bath for hours and hours. I said, "How's your Nook doing?" She goes, "Doing great, Dad."
That's
So,
funny.
yeah, so it
Yeah,
works.
so I love the convenience. I really do. There's a place for it, but generally, though, if given the option of a physical book, I'll choose the physical copy because there's something so timeless about the printed version. The feel of the pages, the sound as you turn them, the smell of a book. I know that sounds really
I never
sentimental.
got I have so many friends, your Aunt Lisa, all that say that, and I just don't get that. I've never been that person.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
So.
obsessed with printed books. The smell of the paper and the ink. The feeling of turning pages, the sound of it, feeling the spine. I really do love holding physical books.
See,
I really do.
I do love that. Not needing a battery. So I like books for that.
Well, but the sad thing about this, though, is that, I can't not keep making reference to how things change when you're a mom. So, you're going to hear me say that a lot with just about any topic. But since becoming a mother, I am always packing around a massive diaper bag filled with everything you can think of. And having a physical copy added to the weight and the bulk that I'm already toting around on a daily basis is actually very exhausting. And sometimes I just can't spare the space. And so though I would prefer a physical copy most times, sometimes I will opt for the convenience and compactness of an electronic version, simply to save me the hassle, or to eliminate the likelihood. I can't say completely eliminate, but lower the likelihood of a physical copy getting damaged by my two little children.
That's a big deal.
Because although physical copies are wonderful, they are also very fragile.
Yeah. Can't repair them. If they get sticky, it ruins the page, whereas we can wipe off our Nooks. The other thing that's amazing, too, is that for me, even though I have a Nook and I have these nice devices, I seem to be doing more and more just on my iPhone. I get the Nook. I have a Nook and a Kindle program on my phone, and I have hundreds and hundreds of books on my phone. So I can read anywhere at any time.
Okay, so this is just me. So I have some of those apps on my phone, but you know what? I despise reading things off my phone. Like, I really just hate it. I hate holding my little phone. I hate the small screen. I hate that it's a screen to begin with. I just don't like it. I really love the sentimentality of holding books, and so sometimes, even if I have the book on there and I don't have a physical copy, I will opt not to read because I just don't want to be looking at my phone. It just irritates me.
That was going to be the question I was going to ask you. It says, but if you had the choice between not being able to read and reading on your phone, which would you choose? So it sounds like
sometimes I choose not to read.
Okay. Well, for me, I do so much work on my phone and have to read, whether it's blogging or research or whatever, because it's just convenient. I figured, well, heck, I might as well have the option of having, hooking my Nook to it as well and having all of my books there as well. Now, on the flip side, it also does something that our Nooks can't do, and that is audiobooks. And
Dad, you've ruined audiobooks for me.
Why?
Because you read to me as a child, and nobody reads with the inflection that my father has. I blame you.
Which is good, because my readers they're gonna like that eventually. I've decided here's a great grand announcement that you can only find on this podcast, on this one, number one. And that is, I hate Amazon. I hate Audible. I hate how they have absolutely screwed authors and taken all the profit from them. So, as I rewrite the books here on Life of Fiction and redo the novels, I'm going to do the audiobooks, and I'm going to have them here that they can get directly from me, but I am never going to put them on another platform. I'm just not going to do it because I don't want to give them a damn penny. So I already have Soundwise. I use that, and I did quite a few books, audiobooks that way. But also I thought, wouldn't it be fun? I don't know. Let me get your opinion. Do you think that it would be fun to, when I write each of these chapters of the books, that I also attach the audio for that chapter, read the chapter, so when you get the release each week of the chapter for the the behind the scenes, so the paid subscription, but I also do the audio and attach it with it, so each week you'll not only get the new chapter, but I also read it to you. Would you like that?
I would love that.
Cool. Okay.
But
I was wondering. I wanted to ask somebody if they thought that was a good idea. I
think that would be great.
I want to do that for people, so.
You should, and you have a really enjoyable voice to listen to. Just your reading voice, well, it's captivating, and you do read with so much feeling, which I appreciate. But you really did ruin audiobooks for me before I was ever even introduced to audiobooks. I got so excited by the idea as a young teenager, getting into audiobooks, and when I started actually listening, I was so deeply disappointed because a lot of the readers, they read in a monotone, which just boggles my mind. I mean, how can you be reading so many adjectives in a monotone?
I don't know.
Reading like fantasy audiobooks and in a monotone, it was painful to listen to. Or the people who read with all this unnatural flair and emphasis in strange places, like they're trying to make it interesting, and it was awkward to listen to. Or okay, one of the worst things about audiobooks is when they have the dual perspectives, and so they have a male voice and a female voice reading, right? And that can be a lot of fun if it's
Lolo's
done correctly.
Now? What?
Okay, but I kid you not, a lot of the male voices they're deep and husky, and it's like they're trying to make it seductive, and it sounds horrible, and it's like it's in slow-mo. It's really cringy, and then the girls are just irritating. They don't read like actual people. It's all so dramatized, and so it's either way, way over the top, or it's monotone.
Huh.
It was really obnoxious to listen to.
Yeah.
It was super obnoxious, and so I just had the hardest time with audiobooks. But you know what? A couple of the audiobooks that I've really genuinely enjoyed are usually the ones that are read by the authors.
I've noticed that too, with an exception, and it's funny because I want to say, Leilani recommended a book that her and Mike are just going gaga over, and she described, and I don't want to say what it is because I'm going to say something not nice right now, and I don't want to cause any blowback to this author for any reason, because the story sounds phenomenal, and she says, and I love this man, that his voice and the way he reads the book. I'm not joking. I bought the audiobook because I don't have time to read, but while I'm drawing, I can listen to a story. So she was so adamant about me trying the story, and when she told me about it, I was fascinated. I bought the audiobook. I have tried to start this book 6 different times. I get a half an hour into the book, and I'm like, I can't do it. Someone stabbed me in the face with needles, because this is it. Well, let's put it this way. The first 5 times that I listened to it, I fell asleep. Within 30 minutes, I was asleep. That's the kind of voice, and I'm like, what? You love? I can't stand this. I played 20 seconds for Mom. She's like, oh, why would you want to listen to that voice? I was like,
Ew.
oh my gosh. Okay, so it's not just me. So I'm not going to name the book because if I have to, I'm going to go buy the dang book and just read the book. But that, oh gosh, I feel really bad. So her and I don't know how Micah feels about it, but Leilani just loves how this, and so doesn't that also go to preference then, that we each like different things? Because there are certain voices that I have just, and I feel bad because I can't get my money back on an audiobook from Audible because I already played the dang thing. But then there's some people that they draw you in. I was going to say the exception is because this is not, he's not the author, but I think his name is James Marston. I know I'm not pronouncing it right. Anyway, but it's the Harry Dresden books by Jim Butcher. It has become my number one favorite fantasy series of all time. I've read everything up to this point to date of 2023. I've read every short story. I've read every single novel. I think there's like 15 or 16 books. I've read all those, everything that has to do with him. I've got a collection of everything. And then, even though I read everything, I started from the beginning, and now I've bought all the audiobooks because I wanted to see if I could experience the same thrill, because I heard the audiobooks were really good. And Chuck down the street recommended and gave me one, and I had it on my iPhone, and I listened to part of it, and I went, okay, that's good, that's just the file. And so I went back and I bought the actual audiobook and have the whole series myself. It was so much better than when I read it. And the voice, this James Marston, I can't think of Harry Dresden sounding like anything but him. And he's famous for reading this series. It's phenomenal. First person, and I know that I've given you all the books. You and Colby have given you all the books, so.
You know an audiobook that I'm enjoying right now?
What's that?
The Wheel of Time. So I couldn't tell you who's reading it. I have no idea. But I've been trying to get through this series. I think there's 14 books in it.
Okay.
For years. Evan.
I own all the books. I cannot reach the 150 page mark.
Of the first one?
Of the first one.
Oh my gosh, if you get past 200.
No, see? That's what Evan keeps saying. I was like, I started reading it 4 times.
Okay.
And just so you know, before you go on with your story, that's the reason why I got an Audible account in the first place, because I wasn't going to pay $60, $70 for the audiobook, and I could pay $14 a month. And so each month I says, I'm going to keep Audible until I buy all the Wheel of Time books, and then I'll cancel my account. And now I've got like 100 audiobooks and I only have like the first 5 or 6 of the Wheel of Time, so... I cut you off. This is before you tell this story.
Wheel of Time.
Sorry, Wheel of Time.
So Evan, when we were working together at S&J, he was telling me all about the story, and you know Evan. Evan could sell anything.
That's why I started the series. He describes things so well. That's why I started.
Yeah, and so I loved the sound of it.
Yeah.
And so he helped me find a set, and we bought a used set off, I think it was eBay. And I started the first book, and I could not get past the 150
I told you, it's that mark.
It was so slow moving, and I was frustrated specifically by one aspect of this, that when you are introducing a reader to a completely new world, yes, then you need to bring them in slowly, and you need to be giving them backgrounds and things gradually as you go in, because if there's no kind of introduction, no easing into it, you just, from page 1, you're using a bunch of names and terms and races that they have no familiarity with, then they're just confused. And
Makes
a
sense.
lot of readers end up backtracking, thinking they missed something, when in reality you just didn't explain it. So it's not the reader's fault.
Okay.
You just jumped into the middle of something and gave them no foundation to stand on, no reference, nothing to reference.
Okay.
And I felt like that's what the Wheel of Time was doing, is I was thrown right into the middle of something. It's talking about legends and prophecies and all of these people that are really well known to this world, but I had no idea where I was and who these people were. I didn't know their significance, and since that was the first book, there was nothing I could go back to.
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea where this came from. I have no idea where. I'm so confused.
Okay.
Not to mention, it's really slow moving in that first book.
Yeah.
So I just,
Like I said,
I had a
I still
really
haven't
hard time
gotten
getting
there.
into it. It took me over a year to
Oh, man.
get past that point, because I kept picking it up. Evan kept checking on me. Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? Come on, you really just got to get into it so we can talk about this. And finally, I just muscled through. And once you get past like the halfway mark in that first book, it gets very interesting. And then they start giving you a little bit of an explanation for things, which is great. But it's really hard to get into
It's
that
like a
first
weeding
book.
out process for dedicated readers, is what it sounds
I
like.
guess, but you know what? This really did a number on on my self-esteem with reading, because I always thought that I was a pretty persevering reader. A lot of people can't get through things like Jane Eyre because there are these long,
Yeah.
these really long sections of the book where some people might describe it as boring. Slow moving, or just really sad. All of those are different things that put people off, and that's a pretty substantial part of that book of Jane Eyre. Same thing with something like Lonesome Gods. It's a Western story. A lot of people can't get through that book.
Wow.
And I always prided myself on being able to get through difficult reads.
Yeah.
Not so with Wheel of Time. That first one just was such an uphill. You have to ask Grammy, love. It's such an uphill climb. But once I got into the second half of the first book, I loved it. I wanted to read more. And so I finished it, started on the second one, and it's been, how many years has it been? I'm trying to remember when I was working with Evan. How old was I, 18?
I think so.
So it's been like 5 years? 5 years trying to get through this series. I think my standing record of books read in the summer is 23. I read 23 books in one summer before.
Wow.
So 14 books should not have been difficult, but then I got married and I had kids, and it's just like, if this isn't a lot more interesting, I'm just not.
Don't care.
I'm not motivated
Yeah.
enough. Here's another thing. So the story building, the world building, all of it that went into Wheel of Time is so complex and so intricate that if I went a long period of time without reading, I had a hard time getting back into it. It started to feel disjointed. Like I became too far removed from the story, and I'd have to go back a couple chapters. And that was really frustrating for me as well.
I've had books like that where you read it and then I'd put it down for the night, and the next afternoon whenever I pick it up again, I go back like half a chapter to try to catch up. And
See, I've had to deal with stories before too, but with the Wheel of Time, it was just that, but on a completely new level. It was so complex that I felt like I needed to be reading it constantly to be able to connect the dots and follow the storyline. It was that complicated. And if I was away from the book for a week and a half,
Can't remember what it was.
doing mom life, I couldn't remember. They'd start making references to things, and I can't remember them dropping so many breadcrumbs. I'd have to go back not just half a chapter, but a couple of chapters to refresh myself on what's going on and all the different components that are coming into play, because it's so complicated, that storyline is. Anyway, and so this isn't just Evan's favorite series, but also my husband's favorite series.
Oh, for real?
Yes.
Colby too.
This
Okay.
This is
I didn't
Colby's
know that.
#1 favorite fantasy series of all time, which was an extra incentive for me to read it. So here's the thing. I was struggling to get through them when we got married, and then we had our firstborn, and he found out that I was trying to get through them. And so now he's kind of,
Encouraging you, prodding
pushing
you.
me for
Okay.
it like Evan is. And I was just like, you know what? I'm a mom. It is not uncommon for me to go a week without getting to pick up a novel. I'm busy doing other stuff.
Yep.
And so it's just been a really hard thing to keep up on. And so Colby he was encouraging me and being really sweet. He'd offer once in a while to, like, I'll put the kids in the bath after dinner. You go read for a little bit. It was great, except it wasn't enough. I was still having a hard time being immersed in that world with all the other things I needed to do. So my husband, being the funny man that he is, he bought me all the audiobooks because he wants me to finish the series so we can talk about it. And he thought, you can listen to the audiobooks while you do dishes, or have the kids help you clean up the living room, or while you're
That's right. You have more
commuting,
options.
all the time that
Right.
you spend in the car driving the kids everywhere.
And was
Just
back
listen
with
to
my
the
point with
audiobook.
your phone. Now you have earbuds. You have a book available.
Yes. And so I guess this was a really, really long way of explaining that convenience wins out a lot of the time.
Because we'd rather not go without. I know that's me.
But the readers for this actually do a wonderful job. I remember telling that to Colby. He bought all of them and gave them to me as an anniversary gift.
Oh.
And when he gave them to me, I went, "Oh no, honey, you should have told me what you were doing before you did this. I don't like audiobooks." And you just bought me 14 books worth. That's not good. And he says, "No, just listen. They do a really good job." And so
If I remember, because I actually I had a goal to buy them all first before I start them, but I think I did the little sample, and it sounds like they do almost like a play. They have multiple people reading the different parts. Did I remember correctly, or
Are you talking about
the
Wheel of Time?
Yeah.
They have.
It sounds like an
two.
audio drama. Just two people doing it?
Yeah, but you can tell it's the same voice, but they change it up just a little bit.
Okay.
But they do a really good job. I was actually very pleasantly surprised. They read with appropriate inflection. And like to actually invested in the story.
timing.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there are very few audiobooks that I feel like I could genuinely say I've enjoyed, but this is one of them. And so it's taken 5 years for me to get through the first 2 books, just trying to read the physical copy.
Wow.
But with these audiobooks that I really am enjoying, I've had them for less than a year, and I've gone through 3 books.
Wow.
So 3 books in less than a year.
And that's a lot. I know that those
5
audiobooks
years
books
for
are
2.
freaking long.
Oh,
It's like 60 hours, something like that.
Something like that. So I believe all of his books are 600 plus pages. I think his shortest one is like 612 pages or something like that. The second book, I believe it was 800 something. Those books are massive.
Wow. We still have 3 more questions.
right,
That's 2 questions. Okay, so the third one, how do you find the books that you enjoy? I think a lot of writers are going to want to know, how do you find them? Because here's why I'm asking that. I am not willing to run any more ads. I'm in a place now where I'm going to work hard, I'm going to strive to be consistent, and I want to entertain the readers that come, subscribers that come to me. I'm not going to go out of this bubble. I have no desire to go out of this bubble. I'm not going to give Amazon a penny. I'm not going to give Google anything. I'm going to stay on Substack and do this, but I'm curious how you find the books that you do.
This is going to sound silly.
Go for it. Go for it.
I read a book when I was a little girl. I don't think I could have been older than 12 maybe.
Okay.
But in this book, the main character, she loved to read, and she had this relationship with books. Books called out to her. And it was described something like different storylines would resonate with threads of her soul.
Wow.
And so she would travel with her father, who was, I believe he was an archaeologist. And any new place that they were in, she'd go to bookshops, or book stands in the street. And she could just run her hand over books, and books would call to her.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
So she didn't have to necessarily read a title or a synopsis or anything like that to know that that book had to come home with her, because it was something that her soul needed or would recognize and would love and appreciate, something that would give her fulfillment in some area of her life.
Wow.
And so she would just touch books and they'd call to her. And I romanticized about that so much as a little girl, this superpower of being able to communicate with books that way, to have them call to your soul.
I think that sounds fascinating.
And so when Mom would take us to on our weekly trips to the library, I would pretend that I was her. I would wander the rows and I would just brush my hand, and then when I imagined that I felt something special, I'd pluck a book off the shelf, and more often than not, I'd check that book out and go home and read it.
Cool.
And so
How often were you right that you went, oh, this is a really good book?
You know what? A good portion of the time.
Really?
A good portion of the time.
That's awesome, though.
I probably sound crazy, but I also feel like this was a really a funny way for me to get good exposure, because I like a wide variety of books, and this is something that I don't seem to have in common with very many other people. People just tend to like what they like.
Yeah.
But I will read almost anything if it's well written.
There you go.
If you did a good job, I will read it. I like fantasy. I like sci-fi. I like nonfiction. I like Western.
How about memoirs?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I like historical fiction. I like a variety of things.
You were reading military fiction, or
I was reading. Yes, I was too.
Oh
I
my
was
gosh! And you were, and I was hearing you. You weren't talking to me, and you're like, "This is so awesome!" I'm like, "Wait, my daughter's reading military? What?" Anyway,
because it
that
was
blew me
written
away.
so well, Dad.
Okay, I get
it. Was so
it.
good.
I get it. Should tell Uncle Bob about that. I think he would be impressed.
And so I will read a wide variety of things as long as it was
well
written
written.
well.
Okay.
There are only a couple of things that I really have a hard time with. I don't like horror. And I am really picky about romance, because most romance just makes me roll my eyes. I just don't care. But if the romance is a side story to the main plot, I can enjoy some romance. But if it's just mush, I just don't care. I don't.
Not the typical female reader, I would guess.
Probably not. But besides those two, I will read just about anything.
But how do you find them is my question. So other than your super psychic power, your mutant ability to find books, which I think is fascinating,
I know my mom taught me better. We'd go places and she'd say, "Look with your eyes, not your hands."
For me, you know where I get most of the reads that I've had? Actually, since I was like 18, it's all been friend recommendations. That's like 90% for me. And it's funny because it usually leads me down a rabbit hole. So because when you find an author that really writes well, you're like, okay, I know I read this series, but I'm going to go check out this other series that they wrote. And for me, more often than not, I fall in love with those books as well. So it's a good thing. But it's usually friend recommendations. I mean, Terry Pratchett, can't remember how I got onto Terry Pratchett, but I know that in the world of Terry Pratchett with the Tiffany Aching series, that got started by Aunt Lisa.
That series.
Because here we found ourselves homeless. We're there in their house, and I just couldn't get out of that slump of how am I going to take care of my family. And I remember Lisa coming in and she says, "Sweetie, I think you need to take a break and you need to put your brain and your heart in a better place." She goes, "I have a book I want you to read." I was like, "Okay." She says, "Have you ever heard of We Freemen?" And I was like, "Nope." She says, "Read it. I'm pretty sure I'll hear you laughing before dinner." And she did. Especially me trying to speak, what is it, Scottish? Welsh? I don't know what it was, but trying to do those accents, I had to practice, and reading those out loud, anyway. So for me, it was personal recommendations.
That series holds a very special place in my heart. So friend recommendations is probably at least 50% of how I find books. The other 40 to 50%, I'm just adventurous. I will go and pull things off shelves and take it home with me.
Huh.
I call me crazy. I think there's a part of me that still pretends I'm that little girl where books call out to me. I'm open-minded. I like a variety of things.
Yeah.
So there's not just one niche that I lean into. I can have an appreciation for all sorts of different writing styles and perspectives and retellings and...
See, I'm just now experiencing things like that. I haven't always been that way. I've been actually the opposite most of my life. I love business books, and but fantasy and science fiction. But I stayed, and now, I mean, when you were a little girl, I remember when we still lived in West Jordan, I remember going to the library, and I just went to the head librarian and I said, I've been stuck in the same genres and reading the same things for so long. I'm wondering if you would go and just pick a book for me, any book, as long as it's not a business book. Anything else, that would be totally fine. Just you pick whatever and I'll read it. And she says, anything at all? And I said, yep, anything at all. And turns out she brought a book back, and I think it was Leilani that walked up, and she says, she goes, my dad knows Barry Eisler. And she goes, no, he does not, because apparently Barry was her favorite author. Mm-hmm. Says, you will, if you like, assassins and CIA and things like that, you'll love this book. And I looked down and I started chuckling, and that's when Leilani says, yeah, my dad knows Barry. She says, no, he doesn't. And I said, actually, I do. And when she took offense, she really got, uppity about it. And I just gently took the book, and it's sad to say, I'd known him for so long, and I'd never read one of his books. So I was like, that's okay. I says, I would love to read this. So I brought it back, and I said, this was fantastic. I enjoyed it so much. So I went to get his next book, and during that process, I got a hold of Barry, and I said, can I buy one of your books. I want to give it to the head librarian here for a birthday present. So I give her the present, and she came up just in awe because it said, you know, "Dear Robin, hope you enjoy such and such an adventure, signed Barry Eisler," and then down below it says, "P.S. Yes, I do know Jamie Buckley very well." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." Anyway, so one of the advantages of being a character, I guess. So, but for people who don't know, Barry Eisler, if you go to barryeisler.com, he is a brilliant writer, and I became friends with him. He was actually the very first review I ever got from my comic books when Wanted Hero was comic book. And he was the second person that bought it. Then he sent me an email and said, "I really enjoyed your comic book." He says, "It reminds me of Eerie Comics." And we became friends, and I made him into some of the characters in the storyline. So that's kind of fun.
That is cool. But I was going to tell you, though, another way that a lot of people find books now is Bookstagram. So I guess that really is just...
Bookstagram?
Yeah, it's Instagram,
Is it?
but it's the book side of Instagram.
Really? Okay, yeah, I'm so...
And that is... that I think that
I
is,
liked Instagram until Facebook bought it, and then I just don't give a crap.
So I think that still falls under the category of friend recommendations, because it is just people reading things, and then they go to the Bookstagram side of Instagram, and they talk about it.
See,
And then on there things tend to catch fire, and then everybody on Bookstagram is reading the same book, and then we all start talking about it.
Wow. So that's what used to happen on Goodreads. And,
But I
and
don't...
then Amazon bought it, and it's like, would you big companies just leave it the hell alone and let people run them? But whatever.
Yeah, so I got some... I discovered some books that I genuinely enjoyed from there, but I'm not really on Instagram very much anymore. So the one of the advantages of liking a variety of things is that the world of literature is my playground.
Yep.
And when I am already predisposed to like and have an appreciation for differences in writers,
Yeah.
then really it's very difficult for any of this to go wrong. I'm just out to enjoy whatever I can discover. And different writers have different things to offer. But I think this is true in relationships too, that if you're out to find something good and something to appreciate and love, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so books are a lot like that for me, that I'm sure most people don't do it this way, but I will just go pick something new and different and unfamiliar just because it's new and different and unfamiliar, and then find something to love about it, something to talk. I still come and talk to Mom about books. And discuss the new ideas that are being that I'm being exposed to.
Awesome.
Self-exposure.
Okay, question number 4. What genre do you enjoy most?
Fantasy. I love fantasy, but you know what? As soon as I said that, a bunch of other book titles started popping up in my mind. Like, wait, but what about me? Wait, but what about me? You know. A couple titles of some...
Keep your superpower under control, Asia.
some sci-fis that were really good. You know what? As time goes by, I'm finding that I enjoy sci-fi more and more, which is weird because that was probably one of my least favorites.
You know what got me onto sci-fi?
Ender's Game, right?
Ender's Game.
Yep.
It was Ender's War was the one that I got, which was a combination of 2 books, Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead. So you got sci-fi in that, and then you have Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So,
Both really, really good.
yeah.
So I've got some sci-fi titles, shouting in my mind saying, wait a minute, you can't choose fantasy over me, or even some Regency novels. I've enjoyed some of those. So I really like Georgette Heyer. And the Georgette Heyer books, those tend to be very romantic. And the reason why I don't mind those, even after my earlier spiel about detesting romance novels, is because the way that Georgette Heyer writes is it's so full of satire. It's so sarcastic and full of witty banter. And her sense of humor really appeals to me. Sometimes it's very dry, and I just eat that up. It's the kind of humor that makes me laugh out loud. You know, a lot of people, they'll read books and, oh, I'm laughing on the inside, you know, or when people are texting and they say LOL, that stands for laughing out loud.
Right.
But are you actually laughing out loud when you said that? I'll bet you most of the time people are just, they're not.
Rolling their eyes.
I was going to say something else, but I decided not to use those particular words. But when I read those books, they actually make me burst into spontaneous laughter. They're just so funny. Her way of writing romance is very entertaining and very playful and so witty. It's very sharp. It's just on point constantly, and I love it. And
That's awesome.
And so I really love the Georgette Heyer novels. But I think just edging out the rest just a little bit, it would still be fantasy. I really love fantasy.
Okay, last question. Question number 5. All the children.
All started with you, Dad.
Yeah. Great. Say, yep, it's all my fault. Go back far enough, it's all my fault. Last question is, do you have a favorite author or book/series that you would like to recommend to the listeners?
I have a lot of favorites.
I'm going to let you do one.
Okay. The first one that comes to mind that I really love, I've recommended before and nobody ever likes it.
Oh no, what is that?
It's Louisa May Alcott's Little Women.
Really?
I loved Little Women so much that I went and found every book Louisa May Alcott, the author, had ever written. I've read every single one of her books.
Wow. Because
it took me an entire summer, too. She actually wrote quite a few. And I loved all of them. She is probably one of my absolute favorite authors, just of all time.
Huh.
I adore her writing. I've also read her biography. She had an amazing life. That
there
woman.
we go.
And I just, Little Women is a classic, and it's one of those books that shaped my childhood. You know those books, you read them at certain points in your life, and you may not have realized it at the time, but it became pivotal to who you are.
You already know, and we don't have to talk about the book, but you know my all-time favorite movie that beats every genre, beats every movie. It's the greatest movie ever made. You know what my favorite movie is, right? I've had to watch well over 100 times, literally from beginning to end.
Are you going to say Big Trouble in Little China?
No. That probably comes a close second, though. I was going to say Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh no.
Nope, wrong. Okay.
That's a good one.
Oh, anyway. Well, that's good. I'll tell you what, I'll make you a commitment on this podcast to hold me accountable is if you will bring me a copy of Little Women, I will read it and we can talk about it.
I would love that.
Okay. Well, thank you for having this conversation with me.
The second one would be Narnia. I know you said one, but I had to slip that in there.
Nope, I'm going to edit it out now. No. Thank you for having this conversation with me, and thank you for tuning in and listening to us rambling on. I apologize for for the real life, but this is how I'm able to have conversations with people is live, and we all have kids, so that's just what happens. So I want to encourage you to subscribe if you have not subscribed over at lifeoffiction.com, and consider supporting us. Make sure you tell a friend or 10 about us. And remember, you are more than you think you are. See you next time.